Biggie was tragically gunned down in a drive-by shooting on the streets of Los Angeles while being driven away from a party in the front passenger seat of a GMC Suburban. The gunman, who was both driving and shooting, pulled up on Biggie's passenger side and fired the shots. And the moment that the shooting happened, the three closest witnesses were Biggie himself, his close friend James Lloyd, aka Lil Cease, who was sitting directly behind him, and Biggie's driver, Gregory G Money Young. Biggie, of course, died within minutes of being shot and was never able to offer any information about what he saw. That left the two closest surviving witnesses as G Money and Lil Cease. And they are the only two witnesses who got a close look at the shooter behind the wheel. As a result, naturally, detectives investigating Biggie's murder had G Money and Lil Cease contribute to a pair of composite sketches of the suspect. And these sketches, this one especially, have been published everywhere in the decades since then and have been the focus of a lot of scrutiny by people trying to solve his murder. But how these sketches were made and how extremely reluctant these two witnesses were to even do them has never been told. This is the story of how these sketches were created and why, in my opinion, they are completely useless.
Did that sketch look like the person you saw?
No.
The first composite sketch was created in Los Angeles on the night of March 10, 1997, about 46 hours after Biggie was killed, when a pair of detectives re-interviewed Biggie's driver, G Money Young, and Young worked with a sketch artist to create the first composite sketch of the shooter. We'll call this sketch number 1. Over the years, it has become the most widely shared of the two sketches that were ultimately created, and it shows a man with a mustache and a bow tie dressed like a member of the Nation of Islam. A week later, LAPD detectives traveled to New York for Biggie's funeral, and while they were there, they re-interviewed witnesses again, and on March 20th, 2 days after Biggie's funeral, they had G Money and Lil Cease work together this time to create a second sketch, this time using an artist with the NYPD. Here's G Money describing doing the two sketches.
Detective Felix, he brought a sketch artist to my house and
In New York?
in California.
Okay.
And he had Cease and I sit down with another one in New York.
And here, Lil Cease confirms that the second composite sketch done in New York is the only one that he contributed to.
The only one you were present at was one in New York. You didn't go to the other artist drawing.
Okay.
I was in New York.
You only participated in one sketch?
Right. Yeah, I was in New York.
And this one we're gonna call sketch number 2. And initially, this second sketch was the one that was most widely shared with the public. Because 1 week later, the Biggie murder detectives publicly released this second sketch at a press conference. And the very next day, the Associated Press published that sketch, sketch number 2, and it was spread around the country. That same day, an informant that I referenced in my episode about Biggie supposedly attending a basketball tournament near Compton on his very last day alive tells police that he thinks the composite looks like a guy named Bubble Up. And Bubble Up was one of the monikers for Southside Crip Terrence Brown, who is now suspected to have been the driver involved in Tupac's murder. But this informant is saying that the composite drawing for Biggie's shooter also looks like Brown. But then this informant also says that the composite looks like a guy named Mike from the Grape Street Crips and that Mike is a Muslim. And again, the shooter was allegedly dressed like a Muslim. And this gets into the first big issue with the two composite drawings. They can kind of be whoever you want them to be. As original Biggie murder detective Kelly Cooper told me when I made Murder Rap, the two sketches didn't even look like the same person.
They didn't look alike. So now you got two composites of one suspect. If I'm doing a case, I always think ahead. What happened when I go to court? For instance, now you come up with two composites for two different witnesses. Your credibility as far as jury see, They not sure, you're not sure. If you're not sure, then you can have some problem with getting a conviction on that case.
Former Biggie murder detective Russell Poole, of course, thought the first sketch, sketch number 1, was Amir Muhammad, who was his prime suspect. And in fact, I believe the first time Amir's photo was ever published, it was in an LA Times article in 1999 that Poole had contributed to, alongside the composite sketches for comparison. However, 3 months after Biggie's murder, Detective Poole re-interviewed Biggie's driver, G Money Young, who contributed to both sketches, and in this interview, G Money told Poole that he thought the second composite, the one done in New York with him and Lil Cease, was the most accurate, not the first sketch that Poole would go on to use as evidence that it was Amir Muhammad. And later, detectives pulled all of Amir's past driver's licenses going back years, and none of the photos showed him sporting a mustache, like what you see in sketch number 1. And here in the comments section of my videos and elsewhere, I've seen people say that they think one of the drawings looks like Kevin Gaines, a cop who was shot and killed at a road rage incident a week after Biggie's murder, or that it looks like disgraced former LAPD officer Rafael Perez. And all 3 of these people have been dragged into Poole's theory as being alleged conspirators in Biggie's murder. But of course, these 2 drawings are supposed to be the same person. Only one person could have been the shooter. And others have compared the sketches to Mob Piru gangster and enforcer Wardell Poochie Faust, who one of Suge's former girlfriends claimed was hired for the job. But it's all subjective. In fact, I think sketch number 1 bears a pretty uncanny resemblance to Shaheed Muhammad, who was a high-ranking member of the Nation of Islam in Los Angeles, who was supposedly at the Peterson Museum the night Biggie was murdered. And Shaheed, who passed away in 2022, was reportedly a known street enforcer and a close associate of Suge Knight. But still, who knows? On April 2nd, 1997, about 3 weeks after Biggie's murder, a prison inmate told detectives he recognized one of the composite drawings as being an acacia block crip known as Peanut. And that same day, a lieutenant with the LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division said it looked like a man named Bruce Millsap, who had been arrested for multiple murders and robbery. And Millsap had been arrested with 3 or 4 9mm guns in his possession, which was the same caliber used to kill Biggie. And detectives apparently took this tip seriously enough that they added Millsap's photo to a photo 6-pack that they showed to witnesses, even though Millsap was ultimately classified as a serial killer who killed all or most of his victims during robberies, which doesn't fit the MO of a drive-by assassination. The first composite sketch comes up again when an inmate meets with detectives to tell them that Southside Crip Terrence Brown confessed to a mutual friend that Brown took part in Tupac's murder. And during this meeting with detectives, this inmate says that sketch number 1 looks like a Looters Park Pyru named Baby Red. So people are coming out of the woodwork to tell detectives that these composites look like all kinds of potential persons of interest. And it only gets worse from there. Over time, as the composite drawings were published in newspapers and aired on television in shows like America's Most Wanted, detectives received dozens, if not hundreds, of tips from people all over the country who thought the drawings looked like people that they recognized. One guy's ex-wife called in to say it looked like him. Another person recognized a composite as a New York Crip named Spice, who Biggie supposedly owed money to for bodyguard services. And another person thought the composite looked like rapper Warren G. And someone thought the suspect was in Tupac's video for To Live and Die in LA, while another one thought they appeared in a video with Puffy and Mace. Another helpful tipster said that the killer looked like the actor carrying a boombox in Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. And another person called in and said they thought they saw the suspect sitting in the audience of an episode of either Oprah or Geraldo. Someone even said the composite looked like Suge Knight, who was in jail at the time. Another caller thought it looked like Baby Lane, Orlando Anderson, the prime suspect for Tupac's murder. And another one said the Crips from LA killed Biggie, and they thought the Composite was just propaganda. So the sketch wasn't anybody. And yet another person thought the Composite looked like Lil Cease, who would have had to have been in 2 vehicles at the same time, both the shooter and a witness. And in one of the biggest plot twists ever, someone reported that the police officer conducting the press conference resembled the Composite. So you can see how detectives were flooded with tips that they had to then follow up on and either exclude or investigate further. But in the end, and this is really the biggest issue that I have with the sketches, the people who had the biggest problem with these composite drawings were the 2 witnesses who helped create them. Because G Money Young and Lil Cease were adamant that they didn't get a good enough look at the shooter to identify him, and that they were basically forced to do the sketches by detectives. Here's Lil Cease.
Basically, it was just that they was like rushing just for a picture, man.
So the receding hairline?
Yeah.
And that's it? That's all you saw?
No, that's still.
Did you see his nose or lips or anything like that?
That's about it.
So everything above the eyes is correct?
Yeah.
And everything below, you have no idea?
Like Greg did most of it.
And here's Biggie's driver, G Money Young.
And then they would say, okay, I know you didn't see anything, but was his nose like this big or was it like that big? And I'm like, I don't know. You know, I really don't know. And
Did you see any facial features at all? I mean, even if it was a split second?
a split second, like he had high cheekbones to me.
So did they show you the sketch after it was done?
Yeah, I seen the sketch.
Okay, did that sketch look like the person you saw?
No. The one in
One
California.
in California.
Is the first one I did.
Okay.
And that's when I was like, I said, man, I don't know. When they showed me the picture, I was like, if you gave me a color picture of this person right now, I'm giving you what I seen. And what I seen was not a person's face. That if you put it up right here to me, I'll be able to say, that's your guy.
So all of this is why I just don't think the composite sketches are of any evidentiary value. And I would add that by now, G Money Young and Lil Cease have seen Amir Muhammad's photo, and they've most likely seen Kevin Gaines and Rafael Perez and Pucci and so on, and neither of them have ever identified anybody as the person that they saw shoot Biggie. And I think the main reason is they just didn't really see the guy. It happened fast, they ducked down when it was happening, the gunman was sitting low when he fired the shots, and they just didn't really see him.